Welcome to today's Explainer. Today we're looking at a truly heartwarming and, honestly, just incredibly insightful story from our source material called The Patient Path to Teamwork. We're going to break down the journey of a dog owner named Sarah and her literally bouncing off the walls golden retriever puppy, Max. Now, if you have ever tried to teach a pet, or let's be real, anyone, a brand new skill, you know firsthand that it takes a very delicate balance of patience, strategy, and mutual understanding. So we're going to map out exactly how Sarah took what was a frustrating daily struggle and turned it into an absolutely beautiful partnership.
Okay, let's dive into this, because this quote right here, it perfectly captures that universal excitement we all feel when starting a new training goal with a pet. Sarah comes to this moment armed with a brand new blue harness, a soft leash, and just a whole lot of optimism. Max, like any typical puppy, responds by barking excitedly and wagging his tail so hard his entire body wiggles. It's pure, unadulterated enthusiasm. But, as we all know, enthusiasm doesn't always translate right away into discipline. At first, Max is just kind of curious. He's sniffing the leash, spinning around in circles, basically trying to figure out what the heck this new contraption is all about.
And well, that brings us right to their core challenge, teaching an energetic puppy to politely walk on a leash. See, Sarah and Max had been together for about a month at this point, and in that time, they've actually built a pretty solid foundation together. Max is a smart pup. He already knew the commands for sit, stay, and come. But polite leash walking? Yeah, that is an entirely different beast. It requires a dog to completely override their natural instincts to run, sniff, and chase literally everything in their immediate environment. It's not just about learning a single word, right? It's about learning a constant state of self-control while physically attached to another living being.
All right, Section 1, the first steps. Let's look at the indoor preparation before they even set foot outside. So Sarah sets them up for success by tightly controlling the environment. She uses comfortable gear, that brand new blue harness and soft leash we mentioned, so Max isn't physically uncomfortable. But the absolute most crucial detail here is their practice area, the living room. Instead of immediately marching out into the overwhelming sensory explosion of the neighborhood, they practice indoors. Every single time Max naturally walks beside Sarah in the living room, she smiles, gives him a treat, and says, "Good boy." She's establishing a baseline rule in a totally distraction-free zone. Staying close to Sarah means you get the good stuff.
Moving on to Section 2, the training method, specifically the stop and wait technique. Let's see what happens when they finally step onto the neighborhood sidewalk, which is just packed with exciting smells, chirping birds, and passing cars.
And this brilliantly illustrates the exact mechanics of Sarah's method. The moment they get outside, his eyes just go wide and he immediately pulls out with all his puppy strength, practically knocking Sarah off balance. Now, the human instinct here is usually to pull back or maybe to shout. But Sarah, she doesn't do that. She executes step 2. She stops immediately and stands completely still. She doesn't scold him, she just waits. And when Max stops pulling out of sheer confusion, the leash loosens. The very second it relaxes, she praises him and they resume walking. So what Sarah's really doing here is helping Max develop a very clear, binary internal realization. Over the next several days of practicing this exact stop and wait routine, Max begins to understand a super simple formula. Pulling equals no walking. The fun stops entirely. But walking calmly, that means the adventure continues. He realizes that he is actually the one controlling the forward momentum of the walk, based entirely on the tension of that leash. It's a simple cause and effect relationship, and it relies 100% on consistency rather than physical force.
Next up, Section 3, facing distractions. Let's look at the real-world test.
This escalation phase is where the training really proves its worth. First up, the ultimate puppy trigger, a squirrel. Max's excitement explodes and he lunges. Sarah immediately reverts to her training and stops dead. Max turns, looks at her, the leash loosens, and boom, he gets his praise. But the real breakthrough? That happens one evening at the park when Max spots another dog. He tries to run toward it. Sarah stops. Max freezes. But this time, he looks back at Sarah and, without even being asked, he returns right to her side. The leash relaxes. He's self-corrected. This massive win earns him his absolute favorite chicken treat and proves that the training is becoming deeply ingrained.
Let's move to and see how this builds over time because, this wasn't just some overnight magic trick. It started on day 4 in the living room. Then we had the initial struggle on that first walk with the squirrel. Then that amazing breakthrough evening with the other dog. Week after week, they put in the work, and that consistent effort leads them to one Saturday morning to basically the ultimate boss-level challenge of dog training, the busy farmer's market. I want you to really picture the sensory overload of this environment. It is absolutely chaotic. You've got children running around everywhere. People are bustling past, carrying large bags. There's music playing softly in the background. For a young, highly energetic golden retriever, this is a massive wall of distractions, wild smells, loud sounds, and completely unpredictable movements.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the incredible payoff to all that hard work. Because despite the utter chaos, Max stays calmly beside Sarah. The leash remains loose. But the most vital detail from our source is that Max is walking with confidence and occasionally looking up at Sarah. He's checking in. He's essentially asking, "Hey, am I doing good?" And Sarah smiles and reassures him, "You're doing amazing, buddy." He isn't just blindly following a command. He is actively communicating with her right in the middle of all that chaos.
Finally, Section 4, the ultimate goal, a shift in perspective. While they're navigating this super busy market, an elderly woman approaches them. She observes Max's absolutely perfect behavior and tells Sarah, "Your dog walks beautifully." And then she poses the golden question that literally anyone struggling with a pulling puppy wants the answer to: how did you train him?
And Sarah's response is just profound. She doesn't list off a rigid set of dominance techniques or some secret trick. She simply smiles and says, "We learned together." She explains to the neighbor that it really just took patience. Whenever he pulled, they stopped. When he stayed beside her, she rewarded him. She frames the entire process not as her imposing her strict will on the dog, but as a mutual learning experience. They both had to figure out how to communicate with each other. So the crucial point is summarized perfectly by Sarah later that evening. Picture this. They are taking a peaceful walk beside a lake. The sun is painting the sky orange and gold. There's no rushing, no pulling, just peaceful footsteps. Sarah looks down at Max and says, "You know, buddy, leash training isn't really about control. It's about teamwork." It's a total paradigm shift. The training worked because they operated as a synchronized unit, totally respecting each other's pace.
And this brings us to the final redefinition of the tool itself. By the time the sun disappears behind the hills and Max is resting his head proudly on Sarah's lap, his whole perspective has entirely changed. He no longer sees the leash as a restraint, or as some annoying thing holding him back from what he wants to do. He sees it as a physical connection to his best friend. It is a literal line of communication and trust.
Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder. If we view the tools we use to guide others, whether that's a literal leash with a pet or the structures we use to mentor, teach, or lead people in our own lives, not as mechanisms of strict control, but as connections built on teamwork and patience, well, how does that change the way you guide them? It's a pretty powerful lesson from a patient owner and a very, very good boy named Max. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, keep learning together.